Good evening, welcome. Welcome to the new International Spy Museum. So excited to have you here for this program tonight, focusing on Gray Day, written by Eric O'Neill. I'm Amanda Olkey, Adult Education Director here at the Spy Museum, and I have loved working with Eric over the years. He's done terrific programs for us at our original location. We've done all kinds of cool surveillance and counter-surveillance programs out in the streets of DC. And if you have not yet been through the new museum, Eric's star of stage and screen in our new museum, he talks about what you'll be hearing about tonight. He talks about his work with Ryan Philippe, and we also have him on screen talking about what it was like for someone to star as you in a major motion picture, which is Breach. And if you haven't seen it, go see it. I don't know if Eric will make that plug, but it is a terrific movie. So here's a little background beyond what he means to us here at the Spy Museum. Eric O'Neill is a cybersecurity expert and former FBI counterterrorism and counterintelligence operative. He is the founder of the Georgetown Group, the premier investigative and security services firm. He serves as national security strategist for Carbon Black and is the general counsel for Global Communities, an international charity. He lectures internationally about espionage and national security, cybersecurity, hacking and fraud, and corporate diligence and defense, and has appeared as a national security expert on CNN and Fox. His writing has appeared in the Boston Globe, The Hill, TechCrunch, and Mashable. He's a graduate of Auburn University and George Washington University School of Law, and the book is so delightful. We were reading it aloud today in my office. Anyway, we love Eric O'Neill, and I am so delighted to have him speak tonight. And we'll be doing Q&A after he does some comments, and I'll ask you to wait for the mic when we do that. Thank you so much. Eric.
All right. Thank you. All right, hello everybody. Can you hear me? Good. So, welcome to the Spy Museum and welcome to DC. How many people here are from DC? Okay, cool. And how many people are just visiting? Excellent. Well, to all our visitors, welcome to the spy capital of the world. There are more spies operating in this city than there are lawyers, and that tells you something. I am a lawyer. I'm also a spy, so I count double. I want to start with a spy story, right? Because that's sort of my brand. That's what I'm about. I'm about telling spy stories and educating people about this covert world that is happening all around us that most of us never see through these stories. And this story starts here in Washington, D.C., in fact, just around the corner from D.C. in Vienna, Virginia, on a very cold day in February. Ryan Philippe has just had the best day of his life. All 7 of his children come to the Hanssen home in Vienna, Virginia to visit. His best friend is in town from overseas, and he's been there for the weekend. It's a Sunday. They go to church together. And at the end of this day, after this wonderful meal that his wife cooks, he throws a Frisbee out in the backyard with his best friend and his Labrador. And then as evening approaches, he drives his friend to Dulles Airport. Maybe some of you who are visiting us here in DC came through that airport. And this is pre-9/11. This is in 2001, but it's February, right? So you could actually go in the airport and drop off your friend. How many people remember that? This is where I gauge the age of my audience, right? There'll be a couple of questions like this. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. But he doesn't. And that's odd. And his friend would later say that. That's called foreshadowing. It's a tool us authors use. He doesn't go in with his friend. He doesn't park. He kicks him out on the curb, says goodbye, and then drives home. And on his way home, he stops at a little park called Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. It's a stone's throw from his home. And he parks his car, and he goes into the trunk for a moment, and then he walks into that park. And he goes along this well-trod path that commuters use to get cut across to the metro, and people walk their dogs, and joggers go through it. Some of you may have even been to Foxstone Park. And he reaches the center of that park, and he stands on a footbridge, a little red footbridge. He looks around him. Now, it's February in D.C., and it's very cold. His breath is frosting in front of him, and autumn has stripped the leaves from the trees. So he can see 360 degrees, and he knows he's alone. And that's important to Hanssen, because he reaches into his sport coat and he pulls out a package. It's about that big. It's wrapped in trash bags and packing tape, so it's completely protected from the elements. And when he feels completely comfortable, he steps off that bridge, and he clambers under it, and he slides the package under the bridge into the superstructure, where it's not going to be seen by a casual observer or kids at play. And he climbs back up on that bridge, and he knocks the dirt off his shoes, and he smiles to himself, because he has just loaded his final drop to the Russians after 22 years as their top spy. Think about that. 22 years in the year 2001 means what? He began his espionage for the Soviet Union, and he survived the collapse of the Soviet Union and the reformation into the Russian Federation, which is supposed to be more democratic, but Putin having his way, he's sort of taking it backwards. We'll leave that for another topic. He survived that change of the guard. And what's really important about that is when the Soviet Union collapsed, the KGB was disbanded. It was all these KGB intelligence officers were fired. And they did what they were trained to do. They weren't going to beat their swords into plowshares and go work a farm somewhere or go retire to their dacha. They were used to being more important than everyone else in a place that was supposed to be equal. So they did what they were trained to do. They stole secrets. And they stole secrets in this old format that we used to store and exchange information. Some of you might remember it. Some of the younger people in the audience probably don't know what I'm talking about. It was called paper. That's right. We used to keep this stuff called data on paper. And we would have reams and reams of it. And we would keep the paper in these things called files. And the files would, if you were an attorney, be in these things called Redwells. And then you would have them classified and organized, and you would put them in this other thing we don't have anymore called file cabinets. And you would have these people who were trained to go retrieve that data from the file cabinets and bring it to you so you could open it and then sneeze and go through the information. And they stole this stuff, files, and they snuck it out of Moscow. And they sold it to the highest bidder, which was more often than not the USA. And if it wasn't us, it was the UK, and we were exchanging a lot of information. And why this is important is because we were catching all those Cold War spies. They were being sold out by their handlers. And so we were rolling them all up. You'll see them all in this wonderful museum. Aldrich Ames and Earl Pitts and Jim Nicholson and all the spies that we were catching. But we never caught Robert Hanssen, because he was different. In the way that he stole information was different. It was revolutionary. It was a complete sea change in how spies operate. Because Hanssen wasn't just a worse spy in US history, and certainly the worst spy in the FBI's history. The secrets that he stole are still damaging us today. Maybe I should just recount a few of those for you, right? Our continuity of government plan and our nuclear secrets, where we would fire and what we'd do if the Soviet Union fired on us, where we send the president and the vice president and the cabinet and everyone who matters in politics if that catastrophic event happens, or, depending on your politics, doesn't matter, but still, they're a target. Undercover operatives like me. So what I did in the FBI as a spy hunter was I was what's called an FBI ghost. And the cool thing about Gray Day is it's the first time that anyone who's ever come out of the FBI has been permitted by the FBI to talk about what it's like to be undercover as a ghost. Why that's important for me is I'm going to tell you stories, and I'm not going to get yanked out of here and arrested, right? So I worked fully undercover. I didn't even have a name. I was known by a code name, and somebody can ask that question later, why I got the code name and what it was. You don't choose your code name. It's given to you. I'll just leave that right there. I worked undercover all the time. I never actually came out of cover. I used disguises. I used telephoto lenses. I used surveillance techniques. I teach a class here at the Spy Museum for my DC friends who want to come and join it. I was almost never seen. And when you lose your cover, the best thing that can happen to you is you're out of a job. The worst thing that can happen to you is a target turns around and puts a bullet in you. So very dangerous stuff, especially overseas. Operations we were running that were completely failed. that we knew the only way that these operations could have failed is if there was a mole in the intelligence community. And finally, there was a lot more, but finally, because truth is so much more interesting and sometimes fascinating than fiction, he gave up a tunnel. How many people know about this tunnel? Have you read Gray Day? Then you know about the tunnel. That's right. That is an informed gentleman right there, and you all will be soon. Yes, that's tunnel. So, you'll like this story, though. It's a cool story, and not many people know about this. The FBI and the NSA get together and decide we're going to pull one over on the Soviets, on the Ruskies. And so they dig a tunnel under Tunla Road, right under Tunla Road, right under the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. And at the end of that tunnel, they put a listening device, very sophisticated listening equipment, and they could hear everything that the Russians are saying in their embassy here in Washington, D.C. I think that's super cool. I see from some of your faces, you're thinking, how dare we do that to an embassy on our soil? I mean, God, that seems completely counterintuitive to the idea of having embassies and sharing information, becoming a global community, right? Not for spies. Don't feel bad, right? Turnaround in the spy game is fair play. When we were going to build our first U.S. embassy in Moscow, in the Soviet Union, we selected this beautiful site. It was a hilltop. It had a great view. Maybe it wasn't as cold as some other places. Who knows? But we showed up there to decide how we're going to design our building, right? And they had built one for us. How nice of them. We get there and there's this big, blocky, gray Soviet architecture building. And so we send in our countermeasures team, which is what the technical term for bug hunters. We go through the building and we look, and the report was that there are so many listening devices in the very concrete of the walls and floors and ceilings, including the bathrooms, we could never remove them all. So the U.S. cut the top 3 floors off the building, dumped all the materials, flew in our own contractors and materials, and built our embassy, made in the USA in Russia. So turnaround's fair play. We had a listening device. The problem was, even before we finished the tunnel, Hanssen gave it up. So follow me here. See how many of you could be intelligence officers. If they know that we don't know, that they know, that we have a super secret tunnel and we're listening to everything they're saying, what can they do? Anybody? That's right, false information. Congratulations, you'll all be spy hunters. You can all be intelligence officers. Go out there and hunt some spies. Yes, false information. Years of it. We thought we were getting golden intelligence and we were getting garbage. So he was a bad guy, and he caused untold damage. There's a lot more, but I could spend my entire 30 minutes just on what Hanssen did. And there's a great exhibit if you want to just go read it, right? Or read Gray Day, and you got it all there too. I'm going to plug this book left and right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, you're going to get tired of that, but I'm very excited. I'm a new author. Bear with me. He wasn't just our worst spy in U.S. history. He was our first cyber spy. The way that he stole was the crest of a wave, a new way that spies are now operating. The old traditional ways still happen. By the way, those of you visiting D.C. or those of you who live here, like I said, more spies here than anywhere else in the world. As you're going through our beautiful parks, lift up a rock, look under a park bench. You might find $50,000. It's up to you whether you keep it or not or turn it into the FBI, but you just found a drop. And it still happens, but the majority of the way that spying happens now is through cyber espionage, cyber attacks. And Hanssen was able to do what he did by stealing information from computer systems within the FBI that, embarrassingly, were never meant to secure from someone in the inside who went bad. He was FBI, not CIA. So, this FBI agent, senior FBI agent, who, by the way, at one point, now, the FBI is smart, right? The intelligence community is smart. I mean, the FBI is premier investigative service in the world, right? Knows there's a mole somewhere in the intelligence community. We know that because we're intelligent. We're the intelligence community. So we're looking for a mole, this massive mole hunt. And so we ask the top Russian analyst, all we knew is someone selling out secrets to Russia, to come on board to the team and help us figure out who the mole could be. Guess who that was? Robert Hanssen. How awesome is it to be on the team that's trying to catch yourself? In fact, he gave, I think, 50 names of likely people who could be the mole in the intelligence community. All of them were garbage, and sent the FBI in these massive wild goose chases all over the country looking at people that didn't matter. And there's a lot more to it. But the important thing is that he was different, and he had changed the way that spies operate, and that's what we're seeing today. Now you're more likely to be attacked by a spy using a spear phishing email than someone trying to get into your business and steal from you. Now every person can be a victim of espionage. It's not just government agencies. So we've got this spy. We learn about him because we recruited a source very close to the arrest. In fact, we recruit the source before December of 2000. And we catch him in February 2001. So it was one of the fastest investigations we ever run. But the source gives us all of Hanssen's mistakes. The Russians didn't know who he was, right? But this is one of these KGB intelligence officers who stole secrets during the collapse and put them in his attic for a rainy day and sold them to the US for millions and millions of dollars and witness protection so Putin couldn't get them, and his kids got to go to the school of their choice. So yes, you can buy your way into schools. Oh, yes, I know. I had to throw that in there. Sorry, students out there. But yes, so he's gone. And in that package he gives us are a couple things. A trash bag that he had wrapped one of his old drops that he put under that bridge on. And now the FBI can run fingerprints. And we get a partial print. A tape cassette. Who remembers tape cassettes? Yeah, some of you kids. Okay, it's retro, right? It's retro. Yeah, I know. But a tape cassette, right? Old tech. And on this tape cassette was the only time he contacted the Russians. It went like this. He calls them at the embassy, and he says, "Hey guys, where's my money?" And they're like, "Oh my God, it's Gray Suit. It's our top spy." He had two names, by the way. His first name that he used when he dropped secrets to the Russians was B, the letter B, for boring. And at some point during his career as a spy, he decided, I need a sexy spy name because I'm the top spy. I'm the worst spy in U.S. history. So he comes up with, get this, it's great, Ramon Garcia. No, Ramon Garcia, right? The greatest spy in Russia's history. And so he calls me, he's like, hey guys, it's Ramon Garcia. And they're nervous, right? You can read all about this. The intelligence officer who was his handler, wrote a book too. And it's this guy calling, and he says, "Where's my money?" And they said, "Did you check the platform at the amphitheater?" He's like, "Yes, and I can't be slogging around in the middle of the night with a flashlight and not get paid." And they said, "Did you check the northeast corner?" He's like, "I'll get back to you." Right? He missed the money, the $50,000 that's pay that off, right? Lift up those platforms, look under those rocks. That's how you get paid. And when they listened to the tape and they heard his voice, they knew. Heads fell all over the FBI. Our top Russian analyst, the guy that has had access to all the secrets, has been a spy for over 20 years. It's Robert Hanssen. Now, the problem was he's already at the State Department. He's about to retire. He's going to retire in April, and it's December. And we had sent him into to the State Department because he had some interpersonal problems. So he had a lot of problems with employees. They didn't really like him. He had nicknames in the FBI, Dr. Death and the Mortician. People were a little scared of him. And he had this issue where he had a woman working for him. She was support staff, so, he'd be nice. And she challenged him on something that he told her to do. She challenged him because he was wrong. And he didn't like that. He doesn't like to be challenged. So he kind of had to grab her and throw her to the ground. And you can't get fired from government. Those of you who are in government know this. It just doesn't happen. You just sort of get shuffled somewhere else to be someone else's problem. And so he did. He got sent to the State Department as a liaison. He was going to ride out to his retirement, and that would be the end of it. Except we figured out he was the spy. So we had to bring him back to headquarters, and we gave him his dream job. So we would come back to headquarters, and we would give him access to information so he would spy. Because we had to catch him red-handed. All the information we had was circumstantial. Not enough to put him away forever. Not enough to put the death penalty over his head and get him to tell us everything that he had done so we could fix it. So he had to spy again for us to catch him. So we built the information assurance section in the FBI. Never had that before. And we put him in charge of it, a brand new division in the FBI. Who here can tell me what information assurance back in the year 2000 means today? Anybody? Cybersecurity, excellent. We put the worst spy in US history, our first cyber spy, in charge of cybersecurity for the FBI. Look at all our systems. Look at all our data. That data that is the currency of our lives. Find out how we can protect it. And we were hoping he'd steal it. And we could intercept him before he got it to the Russians, because that would be really terrible. And then the FBI looks around, right? And they say, what are we going to do now? Somebody's got to be in there in the office with him. I mean, he can't just run this himself. Someone has to actually be hunting the guy in the office. But we need someone who knows how to turn a computer on. And this was apparently difficult in the FBI. Now, a little bit about my background. I was a hacker. Now, I don't like the word hacker anymore. I don't like the way it's used by the media, by Hollywood. The Hollywood version of a hacker, right? You put it in your mind. You all know it before I say it. A guy in a basement. It's dark. He's wearing a hoodie. He's hammering away at a keyboard. His grandma yells down. It's time for dinner. He says, "Leave me alone. I'm almost done." Pounds an energy drink, some bad carbs, hits one key and says what? In every movie. We're in. Yeah, I'm in. Into what? Harry Potter, in that same scene, might as well walk along and wave his magic wand and go like that and say, "I'm in too," because that's magic. That's not how these attacks happen. They're not hackers anymore. This old hacker of yore that we've got in our mind, these aren't the people who are launching attacks. It's spies. There are no hackers. There are only spies. Hacking is nothing more than the necessary evolution of espionage. As we took that paper and we turned it into data in computer systems, and we networked, and we leveraged the cloud, and we're communicating at the speed of thought, we're sharing, we're more efficient, we're more effective. All that information is right in the palm of your hand at all times. The spies had to evolve. They had to evolve to steal the data where that data is from computer systems. So there are no hackers, there are only spies. And the spies are the ones that are after us all now. And as I said, Hanssen led the charge. So here we are putting him in charge of cybersecurity for the FBI. And I was one of those old hackers. I learned to program computers, to build my own computers when I was young, mostly because that was the only way you could get video games to work. Not because I wanted to do malicious things, but you'd hack the game and you'd figure out how to change the code and then it would do what you wanted it to do. And I knew how to turn a computer on and I knew how to hunt spies. And so they threw me in the office with them and said, figure out whether he's the spy we're after. And once you figure that out, figure out how we're going to catch him. It's kind of a tall order. And I bumbled around a lot because I was never trained to do this. The FBI was using someone that they thought might be able to do the job and hoping that I succeeded. And sometimes these situations in your life happen and you just have to take a leap and jump at the opportunity, and I did. Now, I had a lot of weird requests while I was involved in this case. One of them was, make him angry. Okay, this is the guy who grabbed the last person who worked for him and threw her on the ground, and they want me to make him angry. But they want to know, what's he going to do when we arrest him? Because we were hoping to win this case, right? Is he going to get angry? Is he going to come out shooting? We had to understand his psychology. So I said, okay, I'll make him angry. Other goal was, get him away from his car. We want to take it and search the whole thing and add some tech to it. And so he has to be away for the day. So my operation for the day was get him away from his car. And so I go to Rich Garcia, who was in charge of operations for the FBI, and I said, hey, I'm going to need one of those big black FBI SUVs. Yes, we do have them. And he said, sure, I'll park it in the sub-basement. I said, okay. And I'd set up this meeting out at the Defense Intelligence Agency to go see how they do cybersecurity so Hanssen could steal that too. And we go down in the parking lot to look for the big black SUV, and it's not there. And I'm like, how many people are former military or do anything related to stress and know about Murphy's Law? anything that can go wrong will go wrong, so you better plan for it. All I had to do is during my lunch break, maybe go down and make sure the car was there and the keys were in it. But, I'm learning on the job, and it's not there. Now I'm freaking out because this is my job for the day, my mission. I'm about to fail. So I say, hey, let's just go down one floor. It's probably, I got the basement wrong. I'm dumb. I'm sorry. Let's just go down one floor. And he begrudgingly says, okay. We go down one floor, and it's not there. I'm like, let's go down one more level. He's like, no, forget this. We're wasting our time. I've got my keys. We'll take my car. No. I mean, Ubers weren't invented, but let's take an Uber, or let's grab a cab, or we're FBI. Let's show our shields and requisition a vehicle. Anything but take your car. We need your car here. I'm not saying this. This is what's going through my head. We need your car here so we can take it apart and rip it to pieces and search it and put technology in there that's going to catch you because you're a bad spy. And I'm screwing this up today. And he says, we're taking my car. End of discussion. And so I said, well, I failed, but I got the other task. Might as well make him angry. So here's what I did. I go up to him, and I said, hey, wait. We're not going to take your car. He turns around and he goes, what? Excuse me? I said, we're not going to go to the DIA in your beat-up, ugly, old silver Ford Taurus. We'll look ridiculous. We're going to walk around this garage until we find the Tahoe that I reserved. And like a flash, he was on me. He's got me by the lapels. He's lifted me up on my toes. Now, I'm 5'11" on a good day in these shoes, and he's about 6'2". So I always kind of had to look up to him, that thing, not look up to him, but crane my head. Now I'm up on my toes eye to eye, and he's spitting mad in my face. Why do you insist we take my car, or that Tahoe? Why can't we take my car? And I'm thinking, okay, I might have screwed this up. You see, there's this thing in special operations. There's this dial we all know. The difference between suspicion and paranoia. Suspicion's good. You're watching your six. You know who's around you. You know whether you have to tactically take a hard left into the number 2 lane when you're driving and no one's there because you know where all the cars around you are. You know whether you can take a quick turn into an alley and cut through and catch your target in another place. You know whether someone's taken 3 turns with you and maybe you're blown and you've got to end your operation for the day because you're suspicious. You're watching. Paranoia is bad. Paranoia means you can't do anything. Everyone's following you. I saw that grandma 4 times already today. She's changing outfits, or a black cat just crossed my path, and I'm throwing this operation out today. Paranoia is terrible. Paranoia paralyzes us, and we stand right on that razor's wire, spies and spy hunters. And he was falling into paranoia right now, and I had to pull him back. So I said, whoa, boss, I'm sorry. Had to call him boss or sir. Couldn't call him by his name or Mr. Hanssen. And I put my hands on his lapel, kind of like, relax, sat back so he had to lean forward. And I said, it's not about your car, it's about you and how important you are. And we need to show up in that big black SUV because you are the director of the information assurance section of the FBI. You're a section chief. We got to show up. I'm your driver. And he looked at me, and then he looked at me. He let me go, brushed down my lapels, and said, okay, but we'll take my car. Blew that operation of the day, made him angry, check that box, right? And I had to do these kind of things to learn the clues to find out whether he was the spy, and we figured that out pretty quickly. But then, how do you catch him? Where do you find the evidence to catch a spy, even when you're working with him in the same room? I mean, I can't just go up to him and say, hey, man, are you a spy? Because that just doesn't work, right? I try that sometimes in big keynotes. I say, well, all the spies in the room raise their hand. Just trying to catch that guy right there. Sorry, gotcha. There will be men in black suits and sunglasses who will escort you out later. But yeah, see, that kind of stuff doesn't really work normally. I'm going to sign your book really fun and remember you. Anyway, you have to look for clues. And the good thing about bad guys is they have routines. They have things that they do over and over and over again. We all have routines, right? You have your keys, you hang them on the hook when you get home. That way they're there when you need to get in your car and leave. You have a 6-year-old who's very vindictive. You hide the remote up high. so that she can't hide it, and now you can't use your very expensive entertainment system. Yes, my 6-year-old is a spy in training. Routines protect us. Routines keep us safe. Routines keep information safe. And Hanssen had a very interesting routine. He kept a Palm Pilot. This is not a Palm Pilot, but we're going to pretend. We're going to pretend, right? Who remembers Palm Pilots? I want none of you kids to even put your hand up, because it's older than all of you. Yes. I mean, I barely had a Palm Pilot. The Palm Pilots, back in like 2000, were the coolest things in the world. This is the company that became BlackBerry, right? And they were these big, thick devices. And they were electronic PDAs, personal data assistants, and you had a stylus, and you tap, 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 tap all your information in, and basically they were a calendar. Now, you could also sync it to Outlook if you didn't want to have to tap, 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 because that was real annoying. And so you would plug it in and sync it to Outlook, and then you'd go down the hall and talk to some friends, and you'd grab a sandwich, and you'd hit the bathroom, and you'd come back, and it might be done, right? Old tech, but everyone had one because they were cool. And he had a Palm 3X, a dinosaur, right? And he kept it in his left back pocket, always in his left back pocket. And when he sat down, because this thing would have sent him right to a chiropractor if he sat on it, he would pull it out of his pocket and put it in his bag, right to the left of his desk. And when he stood up, he'd pull it out of the pocket of the bag, right in his left back pocket, over and over and over again. Clockwork, like a machine, a routine. Bad guys have routines to protect information. You watch, you observe, and that is a clue. And so I thought to myself, I got to learn more about this Palm Pilot. So I asked him about it. I said, hey, boss, what's the deal with that Palm Pilot? He said, oh, you wouldn't know anything about this. He pulls out his baby. And he says, only executives and people who are going somewhere have one of these. You're nothing but a do-good, know-nothing, lousy clerk. And if you had one of these, you might be able to organize your life and one day make it to executive service like this guy right here. But you're not. So that's all you'll ever be. I said, all right. I learned to have thick skin during this case. And I went to the Office of Science and Technology, who we ostensibly worked for, and I went to the head scientist of the FBI, a guy that literally looked like Albert Einstein and was really awesome. He could talk about like particle physics and then about new communications technology. You could just sit there if you're kind of a nerd like me and just lap it all in all day. And I said, hey, Professor Kielman, I'm going to need 2 Palm Pilots. He's like, really? I was like, yeah, the Palm 5's out. I'd like to requisition 2 of them. He's like, well, Eric, why would you like 2 Palm Pilots? And I said, well, sir, I don't want to be a no-good, do-nothing, lousy clerk for the rest of my life, and I need this so I can be an executive. Could you give me 2? Because I would like to give 1 to my boss. He looked at me and said, that's probably one of the best procurement requests I've ever gotten, so I'm going to give you 2. And I did. The Palm 5 was cool. It was half the size, it was nice and slim, and you could play games. Like you had Minesweeper, like you had Hex War. Like you could distract yourself, right? And that came in real handy when I was in the office board. And I went to give one of them to Hanssen. And he pushed it back across the desk and he said, I don't need that, I've got mine. I've written the encryption on this myself. And these idiots at the FBI, his words, not mine, couldn't crack it on their best day. Clue, that's a big clue, everybody. Take notes. When you need to catch your spy, you need to look for clues like that. And that's an awesome one, encryption. We use encryption to protect information. Why would he encrypt the whole thing? The thing never leaves his backside in case he was worried about it, right? So we got to get it away from him. This is how we did it. We used this term of art called shenanigans. Look, come on, we have to have a sense of humor in the FBI too, right? There's a better term for it, but I like that one. I'm half Irish, bear with me. An assistant director is read into the case, and he comes into the office unannounced. He slaps $20 on Hanssen's desk when we're sitting down, super important, and says, you and me the shooting range, and I bet you that 20, 5 targets out of 5, I will beat you. Now, we used everything we knew about Hanssen. Doesn't like to be challenged. Doesn't like authority. Really likes to shoot. And he grumbles and he says, I'm too busy, I don't have the time. And the guy says, I don't think you understand. This wasn't a request, get your gear and follow me. Now he's angry. And when he's angry, he does stupid things, like grab a subordinate and pick them up on their toes, or grab a different one and throw them on the ground. We made him angry. We pushed him off his game. We broke his routine. Because if the first time he stands up and he grabs he doesn't grab that Palm Pilot out of his bag. He grabs his ear protection and eye protection. He holsters his firearm. And he stumbles off after this guy. And I remembered that black SUV. I remembered Murphy's Law. And so I have an asset in the shooting range who texts me on my SkyTel alphanumeric two-way pager. The only people who had those were FBI agents and drug dealers. And I couldn't tell my parents what I did, so, hey, Dad, I really was in the FBI. And it says, in-pocket shooting. So I'm like, yes. I go to the bag, and I go through it, and I rifle through the bag, and I find the Palm Pilot. I find a data card. I find a floppy disk. All that has data, right? Take it all. And I'm very, very, very excited, because when you watch the movie Breach, because after this I know you're going to read Great Gray Day, and then you're going to watch Breach in that order, because, hey, books are better than movies, even though Breach is spectacular. If you want to know about how real spy operations work. But anyway, I look through and I get those all. Ryan Philippe in the movie Breach, right, can do everything the first time he tries, because we don't want you to sit in the seats for 4 hours. For me, it took a while. So we tried this a few times and it didn't work, and finally it worked. So forgive me for the next part. I run down 3 flights of stairs. I hand it off to a tech team. They start copying it one-to-one because they say, it's encrypted. We're not going to try to break the encryption now. We're going to clone the whole thing, all of it, and we'll try to break it later. I'm like, you can do that? They're like, we're the FBI. I'm like, good, do it. And they throw me outside the door because, as you can tell, I don't stand still very well, and I was making them nervous. And as I'm standing out there in the hall, kind of bouncing on my toes, this is before fidget spinners, I pull out, I get a page, and I pull out the pager, and it says, out of pocket, probably coming to you. So I holstered that bad boy, and I knocked on the door, and I said, hey, guys, I'm going to need those devices. And they said, don't worry, we're almost done. We're almost cleaning it up. And I said, you don't understand. He's armed and I'm not, and I got to get there before him because he's also angry. It's not like Jack Bauer. It's not like James Bond. It's not like you get to the bomb and you have 0.3 seconds and you cut the wire and you just saved the world, right? Nothing like that. I had like a cool 2-3 minutes, as I had timed how long it takes to run if you sprint from the rifle range, from the shooting range all the way up, from the sub-basement all the way up to room 9930 on the 9th floor. So I get into the room, I slam the big door to the skiff. It's a secure compartmental information facility, right? And I'm not going to go into all that, but it's a big freaking door. And it's got a seal-qualified combination lock on it and a electronic keypad where you waved your secure badge on it, and for reasons that completely boggle my mind, a physical key. Like, if you could get through all that, you can't pick a lock, right? But anyway, that saved me, because I saunter into his office, and I get to his bag, and I'm thinking, I won. This guy broke the case. I got the Palm Pilot. I'm sure it's got to have what we want on it. And I look at his bag, and I realize 4 pockets, and I have 3 devices, and I don't have a single clue. Not a clue. I'm thinking, I think the floppy disk was leaning up against the Palm Pilot, but I know the data card wasn't in there, and I can't remember what side, and I look, and I'd gone through the whole bag. Hey, the case is blown if he gets back and it's gone. Put a Post-it note on the bag, right? I didn't think about it. You learn on the job, right? So I kneel down in front of the bag, and I'm between praying and trying to self-hypnotize myself. Like, I'll cast my mind back and remember the moment, and as I'm doing this nonsense, I hear him coming through that door. So I just dropped it all, zip, ran into my desk, sat down, and I put the best poker face I've ever had. I literally have ever had. I'm horrible at poker these days because I used it all up. And he comes in the office and he glares at me on the way by, and he goes into his office and he slams the door behind him, and I hear zip. Now, ask yourself, in that moment, considering the odds, any math majors in here? 3 devices, 4 pockets, no idea? It's exponentially bad. I spoke in front of a group of physicists once, and like 5 of them bounced up and gave me the exact number, and I was like, I should have wrote it down. I'm a lawyer. Math is my friend, but, we're not dating. It's not good. They're not good odds. So do you sit there, or do you run? Because in the world of covert operations, in the world of spy versus spy and spy hunting, if you're not there, you move that needle so far from suspicion into paranoia, you've buried it, and the case is over. He cuts and runs, because it doesn't take much for a spy to decide to run. And we knew he had an open ticket to Moscow and a passport. I knew, looking back, right, grass is greener, looking back, if I hadn't stayed in that seat, he'd be roommates with Edward Snowden right now, living it up in Moscow. And I thought to myself, this is my case. This is my fault. And it is my duty to do whatever I can to fix this. So I stayed in that seat. And weird things are going through my mind, right? Stress does that to you. Oh, boss, I tripped over your bag and everything flew out and, the pockets magically came open and I put it all back. Did I do it wrong? I don't know what I would have said, but he comes into the office and he leans over my desk and he stares at me. You know how people do that? They hold a stare. Actually, she's creeping me out. But yeah, they hold that stare for too long to that moment where you feel like really threatened. That fight versus flight goes in because they just want to see how you react. I don't do anything. I just look at him like, hello? And he says, were you in my office? And I said, yeah, I was in your office. I put a memo in your inbox. Didn't you see it? We used to have memos. They were in paper. You didn't send emails. And he looks at me, and then he looks at me. He says, I never want you in my office again. He leaves for the day. 3 days later, he's on that bridge. He's had the best day, smiled to himself, final drop to the Russians, and he retraces his steps along that old path. He reaches his car, that same silver beat-up Ford Taurus, reaches in his pocket for his keys, and he goes to put them in the door, and 2 panel vans screech to a halt. The side doors open. FBI agents and SWAT with their weapons jump out, point their guns at him, tell him to drop his keys and raise his hands. He says, the guns are not necessary. And then he says, what took you so long? And he's arrested for espionage against the United States because a Palm Pilot is really just a calendar. And when we decrypted it, we knew not only when he would make that last drop, but exactly where he would do it. So when he felt safe on that bridge, he was surrounded by people like me, ghosts, wearing camouflage, watching his every move and recording everything he did. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you catch a spy. Thank you. So with that, we have time for questions, and I will try my best to give you good answers.
You will wait for the mics. We will bring them to you.
Then we'll sign some books.
Hi,
Yes,
Eric.
ma'am.
Hi, Eric. My name's Dee. I'm also a lawyer, and I also graduated from George Washington Law
Yay,
School.
awesome.
How could you write a book like this? And did the FBI give you permission to? How could you expose everything like this in a book?
Yeah, so I wrote, first of all, just to back up on your question a little bit, because there's a cool kind of backstory to it. I never intended to make a movie. I always wanted to write a book. Writing for me has been my goal for my entire life, and I intend to continue, right? But when I first tried to write a book right out of the FBI, which, by the way, it would have been a terrible book. It's so much better at 46 than when I was 26. Believe me, I read my own manuscript, and I had to hide my face under a pillow. There were already, by the time I got permission to tell my story, they had to declassify my part in the case. There were 6 books in publication. Every reporter had read the affidavit for arrest and written a book and interviewed some people. So I was discouraged, but Hollywood really liked the story and said, you're our story, and bought the rights. Well, fast forward, I always had this idea of writing this book. I have this wonderful agent who heard me speak just like this and said, I'm offended as a literary agent that there's a movie about your story and not a book. And she really championed it with me. The first people to read my book were the FBI. Yeah, I had to submit the whole manuscript to them. And I was shocked at how much they let me leave in. You're going to learn so much about this shadowy world that I couldn't believe they let all this stuff in the book. The two things that they made me take out that I actually thought were two CIA cases from the 1980s that I'm not allowed to tell you about, but you could Google them because they're all over there. I'm like, they're in the public. And he says, the FBI agent who's doing the review says, they might be in the public, but the CIA hasn't admitted to them, right? And so if you want to keep them in there, we're going to have to send your manuscript over to the CIA. I'm like, I'm cutting them. Because it would still be in pre-publication review with the agency. A year after you submit it. I know all sorts of people. I was talking to every author I could talk to who had gone through this, like, what's it like? I've heard it's horrible. And they all said the same thing. Make sure it doesn't go to the agency. Yeah. So I kept it with my homies in the FBI, and we got it through. It took some time, but my editor was really happy, and now you have Gray Day. By the way, Gray Day is his code name. And that was the last thing I needed them to declassify. Until that book, that was classified. Although Louis Freeh let it slip once, and I used that to push them a little bit. Louis Freeh was the director of the FBI when I was in there.
What was your code name?
I knew I'd get that question. Werewolf. It is not because I'm hairy. So I'll tell the story. It's in the book too, but in the FBI Academy, the FBI Academy is really cool. Like, the best part about going to the FBI is getting to go through the academy because it's really a cool place. And I mean, other than the fact that it's built with all these tubes that connect all the buildings, we call them gerbil tubes. And of course, when you live in a closed environment like gerbil tubes, like maybe astronauts do sometimes, you get really sick really fast. So the first thing that happens to everybody who goes through the academy is you get really sick, and then you get better, and then everything's cool. And the FBI Academy has all sorts of rooms, training rooms, boxing rooms, weightlifting rooms, a fake city called Hogan's Alley where you can practice stuff, and shoot all sorts of ranges. And finally, a bar, because you have to have a bar, right? We're on a dry marine base, and it's like the only place you can get a beer is in the FBI Academy. And so we're in the academy. We go to the boardroom. We're about to graduate. We're all really excited, and we're drinking beer. We drank more than a few. And for some reason, I looked and I saw a full moon through these little windows. They're at the very top of the wall. I saw the full moon, and for some reason, I decided I'd stand up on one of the tables and howl. And that's how I got my code name. It was better than another guy who was called Trash. Right there in the middle.
Oh, here, if you'll pass this down. You'll pass it down.
Good evening. My name is Busari Siaka from Cuyahoga Community College from Cleveland, Ohio, Emmanuel Scholar. I'm going through your chapter 2 in grade A, and from that first paragraph, you said there is nothing such like a lie detector.
I'm sorry.
There is no such thing as a lie detector.
Yes.
So I understand you explain it in the book that spies have different tactics they use to actually throw that lie detector away, not really functioning very well. They wear a tag in their shoe. But now, we've watched so many movies in such a way that lie detector is always being used for people to catch if they lie or not. Does that mean that a lie detector cannot even work on a private citizen?
Yeah, so here's the thing about a lie detector. There's a reason that it is not admissible in a court of law, is because there is no such thing as a lie detector. We have no way to definitively determine whether someone's lying or not. What a lie detector is called a polygraph machine. So it's a machine that measures physiology. So in the old days, when really all you need is something on your finger and maybe a cuff to measure your blood pressure and your oxygenation, these are data points to tell how you are responding to questions, right? So it's just a machine that says his heart rate increased, he's perspiring, right? He's breathing faster. So it's all about theater. when I did my, and I describe this in the book, when I did my first polygraph, right? You go into this this darkish room, and it's an ugly building in a nondescript place in the middle of DC. It's not an FBI headquarters or the field office. And you're like, why am I here? And you're marched in there by a guy in shirt sleeves, and you sit down in this really awkward chair that belonged in like 1922. And they put this heavy belly band around you. They just need an electrode, but no, it's this evil-looking belly band, and then this big cuff that is constricting your arm, and like all these things on all my fingers. They only need one. It's to freak you out, right? To put you in a state of anxiety. They want you scared. They want you anxious because they need to make you lie. Now, the problem is I'm a Boy Scout. I'm literally an Eagle Scout. I was like a good kid. I mean, I wrecked myself a lot of times, but I didn't really do bad stuff. So they couldn't catch me in a lie, right? And they needed to make me lie. So they're trying to just ask questions like all sorts of stuff. They finally got me to lie because the guy says, and I'll never forget this, he says, we don't want bad people in the FBI. We would never want someone in the FBI who, for example, lied to someone that they really care about. Whoever told any kind of lie, like someone who lied to a family member or something like that. Anybody like that, I would just immediately, that would be the end of this exam, and I would throw you right out. And the next question he asks is, have you ever lied to someone who loves you? And I'm like, no. Now, I'm freaked out, so everything spikes, right? And then the question after that was, have you ever been contacted from a foreign intelligence agency agent or someone from a different government about this application process or your role in the FBI? Now I feel comfortable. I don't have to lie. So I say, no, not at all, right? Everything goes, phew. Now if you understand the test, you know what those questions are where they want you to lie and what the questions are where you're not supposed to lie, and then you change your physiological response, right? So you know when you're supposed to freak out, and you know when you're supposed to be cool. And so what it really becomes is it's a game between you and the polygraph examiner. Who's better? Because I remember I got into law school, right, GW, and we had a class on this, and the polygraph examiner came in, and he says, yeah, I pretty much have a 99% correct rate, right? I'm very good at my job. I'm extremely good at figuring out. He goes through someone, and he heard me whisper to somebody like, I could beat this guy on any given day with a lion. He's like, hey, how about you? And I'm like, you don't want to do me, man. You just do somebody else. He's like, no, come on. And he got me because he was good, because he was really, really good. So in a polygraph exam, you're kind of rolling the dice. Do I have a good examiner or a crap examiner? Because if you have a good examiner, then they're going to get you. Maybe, like 80, 90% of the time. But if you have a bad examiner, you can lie your little way right through it. Yeah. Or they'll give you an unconclusive, and then that hurts you just as much as deceptive. Yeah. But good question. Are you reading the book, the whole Keynote, or listening? I'm just playing with you, man. Yes, sir.
So who else worked in the section beyond you and Hanssen? And were they in on the sort of trying to catch him?
No one else worked in the section. The only other person in headquarters that I knew about the case was Richard Garcia, who worked down the hall. And he was brought in because operationally you couldn't do any of this without bringing the section chief in charge of operations for the FBI. He was also my safety net. If things went really south, I was supposed to run to his office because he was well armed, like all the time, right? The only other guy in all of FBI headquarters that I knew definitively was in on the case, because they tell me as little as, everything's compartments within compartments, was the director. And there's no way I'm running into the director's office, right? You just don't do that. You avoid the 7th floor. Yeah, that was it. And now there was a much bigger team out of the field office that were working. In fact, by the end, there were 2 different squads working. And actually, this didn't make it into the book because I found it out later, but a little Easter egg for all you guys, because it's kind of new. I was talking to the real Kate Alleman, and she told me that there were 2 teams, 2 squads, and they had a bet. who could get the information that got Hanssen first. And I won it for my squad. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Oh, hold on, please, sir.
Hey, try that again.
Did you ever find out what happened to the Tahoe that was missing?
Yeah, I asked Rich Garcia, who's still a good friend. It's like, what the hell was that Tahoe? It's like, I don't know, administrative thing. He's like, you didn't go down and check? I'm like, right.
All right. I got a question in the
learned,
back.
though.
Hello, my name is Jay O'Neill, 1L.
Cool name. Almost there, but I love it.
Thank you. My question is, as a spy and among your colleagues. Thank you. As a spy and among your colleagues as spies, was there any characteristics that were in common among good spies?
Yeah, I think, let's just look at Hanssen for a little bit. He never let the Russians know who he was, never let him know his identity at all. That way it made it very hard for our spies in Russia to give up his name. He was careful in how he stole information. He was a revolutionary, in fact, for that time, because he was stealing it from computer systems when the other spies were still stealing paper and the old tech. He was one of the first spies, U.S. spies, to drop floppy disks to the Russians. 5 1/4 floppy disks. They go like, bup, bup, bup. I make a joke in my book. We all know it's not true because the Russians are brilliant mathematicians. They understand what a floppy disk is. But I like to imagine that the first time that, when I say drop, does everybody know what I mean? Okay. I'm going to give you some spy lingo here. This is a little bit out of Amanda and my Surveillance 101 course, so you get a little preview. Here's the old way of exchanging information. And by the way, this still does happen because the traditional ways are still very useful. I steal information, right? Maybe it's a floppy disk. Now it's like thumb drives. Now, you just send it over the internet, but let's pretend it's a thumb drive in a package. Let's pretend it's Hanssen's package. And I go to a prearranged drop site where my handler, the intelligence officer in Russia, has made some prearranged locations and dates where I'm going to leave information for them. So I put it under that bridge in Foxstone Park. And then as I'm leaving the park, I take a piece of tape and I put it on the Foxstone Park sign. And I go home. Now, around that date, every day at about the same time, a Russian intelligence officer, there's plenty of them, they all work out of the embassy, comes out, gets in his car, and just starts driving. And we'll spend 8, 9 hours just driving around, shopping at malls, going to parks. They really back then loved buying stuff so they could bring it back. A lot of shopping, a lot of malls, a lot of parks. And they're doing what's called a surveillance detection run. They're looking for spy hunters. They're trying to find out if ghosts are on them or if they're black. And if they feel comfortable that they don't have surveillance, he drives by that sign and he sees the tape and he knows that the drop is loaded, but he doesn't go get it. He goes home and he tells everybody and they go, yay, we're getting secrets. Now they send a fleet of cars out. They want to exhaust all surveillance, screw us all up. And there's one guy who's doing the most dangerous surveillance detection run because if he gets caught going to that drop site, he might blow his asset, right? There's a lot of really, really cool stories in this museum about this fact, right? But he makes sure he's completely clean. If he sees a cat that scowls at him, he goes home and they try another day. If he feels comfortable, he parks his car, he walks into that park and he retrieves the drop. That goes in the diplomatic pouch that goes over to Russia that we can't intercept or open, and they've got our secrets. Now it all starts again, because Hanssen has to get paid. I have to get paid. So they put a tack or another strip of tape on a telephone pole that is on Hanssen's drive on his way to work. Now he's looking at that pole every time he drives, and he finally sees it, and he knows it's payday. But he doesn't go right over there and pick it up. He waits, and he makes sure nobody's following him. On another night, and he slogs around with a flashlight in this amphitheater in Virginia, and he goes and he picks up that platform and he gets $50,000. And it keeps going year after year after year. And there's all sorts of different cutouts, but the problem is they can only communicate in these drops. So if you miss a drop, you have like a backup date, but then you're in a lot of trouble if you don't hit it. So there's a lot of tension between this. That's why he had to make that phone call, and that's one of the big things that got him. Thank you for your question.
I've got one back here.
We got one here and one there and then one here. Okay.
Hi, my name is Seti. I'm also from Tri-C in Cleveland. So we see a lot of movies like The Matrix, Blacklist, FBI here, CIA there. Is the real world far away from what it's actually in those movies? And I mean, you're an agent, so in what world do we really live in? Like, are they really people looking through our cameras in the computer and like listening to our phone calls and scanning our...
So it depends on who you ask. If you ask Edward Snowden, there are, but no. The real world is not like movies. Actually, there's a great exhibit in the Spy Museum here that takes all those old movies, and people like me, I do one for Breach. We tell you why we did certain things, but why it's not like real life. Espionage, the spy game, spy hunting, can be pretty boring. My wife's the best. I talk about my days in the FBI like it was the coolest stuff in the world. And in many ways it was. The skills I learned, you just can't find anywhere else, right? When you work for one of these special operations groups, I mean, you get skills, where else are you going to get that, right? You can play, you can get close to it, but unless you're really in it, living it, and your life is on the line, you're just not there. But she reminds me about all the days I came home where I was like, I sat for 7 hours and 45 minutes looking at a door, and it finally opened, right? And then it was go time for 15 minutes, and then the next shift came on. It can be like that. Movies take all the best parts of the spy game, and you get it for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But you don't get all of the monotony and the minutia and the analyst work and the real stuff that goes into catching these spies. Is everybody listening to all your phone calls? No. No, because now maybe computers are listening to things. There was that issue called PRISM, and that's what Edward Snowden is famous for, revealing. But there aren't enough people to just watch the spies and the terrorists we know about. That makes me nervous. Much less you, unless, you're a spy or a terrorist. But unless you are, you're probably okay. Yeah, I'll never know. Or maybe I do. Yes.
Hi, very interesting talk. I have
Thank
a
you.
question. Do you know how much money was paid to Hanssen, and whatever happened to him?
Okay, so how much money was paid to Hanssen? He made a little less than $2 million. He made peanuts for the billions of dollars of damage he did and the intense amount of secrets that he stole. Now, getting back to the gentleman over there's question, he was a smart spy. One more thing we can add, he only took enough money to spend it in kind of walking around money. He never took so much money that he would get caught. Because if you can't put all that money in, and he did actually put some money in a bank, but the FBI wasn't really looking, but he couldn't put $2 million in a bank, right? I mean, what are you going to do with bricks of cash? Think about that. I mean, it's kind of a neat exercise. When you're going to sleep tonight, because it'll help you get to sleep, imagine this scenario. You have a brick of illegal cash. It's $100,000. What do you do with it? Starbucks. Yeah. But you're going to be worried every day about that $100,000 that you've hidden under your bed or something, right? In cash. What happens if your house burns down? So, he was very careful with how much he took, what he spent it on, and so he wouldn't get caught. So he's very clever that way. But and of course, the Russians back then were very good at giving diamonds. So who knows how much of that he got, what he did with that. He pled guilty to espionage on a number of different counts. They had him on giving up nuclear secrets, the bloody hands. He got 2 people killed who could have possibly given him up, our assets overseas, and for espionage, for being a traitor. So he could have been put to death for any of those reasons. He pled guilty, and in return, he was given consecutive life sentences, each with no chance for parole. So he'd have to have all sorts of presidents pardon him before he would get out of there. And he's in Supermax Penitentiary in Florence, Colorado. Where's my buddy from Colorado? There he is, Jeremy, right there. And he will be there for the rest of his life. He'll never leave. I just got a picture from a friend of Hanssen, and I got 2 pictures, actually. And the first is Hanssen, and I think one of them is in the Hanssen exhibit. The first is you have the one with Hanssen the day he was put behind bars, and he's smirking at the camera. And I just got a recent picture, and he's like this. And you kind of almost feel a little bad for him. Then you don't.
Right,
Yes.
I've got one back here.
Sure. And then I answer questions when I sign books.
So hypothetically, if we were to go out and find 50 grand under a bench, would anybody miss it besides the people that put it there?
Well, there'd be a spy who'd be pretty angry at you, and they can be a little vindictive. As a former FBI operative and an attorney, I advise you to turn it into the FBI. And you could be a hero. You'll be 50 grand poor, but you could be a hero because you could break a big spy case. Or they'll say, or as soon as you pick it up, they'll swarm you and say, put that back. We're trying to catch the guy when he picks it up. And now you're read into a spy case. That's cool, too.
So you talk about like the first time you lied to your wife and lying to your family, and obviously they now, I'm assuming, know what you have done. How do you reconcile that and repair whatever damage you've had to do to those relationships?
Yeah. Well, my dad's in the audience, so he still loves me. I'm still married, and Jewel and I have 3 kids, so she still loves me, I'm pretty sure. How do you repair that? You take time. You really do take time. That was one of the main reasons that I chose to leave the FBI. I truly wanted to repair that relationship with my wife, to build the family we wanted. And I knew that if I stayed, especially doing the high-stress work that I was doing, and I felt that I had an aptitude and a hunger for the undercover, the dangerous undercover work, that it would probably not be good for my marriage. And I certainly wouldn't be a great dad, right? You could still be an awesome dad, but not the dad I wanted to be. So I chose to leave and see what I could do with my legal career. And kind of came full circle through working for a big firm to now working for a charity that does work all over the world, just humanitarian work, and running my own company that does the same kind of cool spy stuff, but on my terms. And speaking in front of wonderful audiences like all of you, which is my real passion. Thank you.
Since Hanssen didn't really get that much money, what was his reason for spying?
Why did he spy? Someone always asked that question. I was like, gotta come at some point. This is such a smart audience. I never really answer that during my keynotes because I know that some wonderful person always asks it. Why? Why did he spy? Why do spies spy? What makes a person betray everything? Betray everything, his country, his family, the trust that was given to him when he became an FBI agent, the oaths that he swore, the religion that he believed in and practiced. He was a Catholic. Why? Well, I mean, it sounds bad, but in the beginning, he needed money. Now, it wasn't only that. He also could have been revolutionary for the FBI because of the way he thought. He was one of these people who for years was pounding a drum saying, we're going to get beat by a spy because we aren't investing the time and attention into computerization. We're behind the curve. Companies and corporations are ahead of the FBI in computerizing, in understanding protecting data. And everybody in the FBI was just like, you're a nerd, be quiet, these computer things are scary, and I like handwriting my memos. And they called him Dr. Death, and they called him the mortician, and they told him to go away, and they called him a joke, and he got angry. And when you get angry and you need money, it becomes a little easier in your head to justify becoming a spy. You have that triggering event. And so he did what he knew how to do to get money. And after a while, so he volunteered. He was never recruited by the Russians. He volunteered himself to them. He sent a letter to a guy that we knew was a spy, who didn't know we knew was a spy. So just by sending that letter saying, I want to work for you, I know you're a spy, it was his first act of espionage. And he wrote, as my bona fides, here are some spies that we have overseas that you might want to go execute. Bam! He came right out of the starting gate, right? And got worse from there. At some point, he made enough money. He got promoted to executive service. He was making a good salary. And then I don't think he wanted to stop. Because for Hanssen, it was doing that thing that made him more special than anyone else. That thing that he was better at than anyone else. He was the greatest spy. He was the worst spy in FBI's history and probably one of the worst spies in US history. So why would he stop? I mean, that's a tough thing to give up when you're the greatest at something, anything. That's a hard thing to give up. So I don't think he wanted to. And I think that when he finally made that final drop to the Russians, it was very emotional because it was an ending of an entire career. So watch out for those triggering events. And I hope none of you become spies, unless you're working for us.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much.